You need to say for each problem whether you should fill in the blank with necessary or instead fill in the blank with sufficient. We'll just go through and answer them. Being a sister is sufficient for being a sibling because if you're a sister, you're automatically a sibling. Being a sister is not necessary for being a sibling. If being a sister were necessary for being a sibling, that would mean that every single sibling is a sister. But some siblings, like me, are not sisters. We're brothers. Being a sibling is necessary for being a sister. You have to be a sibling to be a sister, but it's not sufficient. Not every sibling is automatically a sister. Completing an undergraduate degree, this should say degree, is necessary for going to grad school. You can't go to grad school if you don't have an undergrad degree, but it's not sufficient for going to grad school. So when you get an undergrad degree, you don't automatically enter grad school. Next one, a marathon being 26 miles, running 100 feet is necessary for completing a marathon. You can't complete the marathon without running 100 feet, but it's not sufficient. It's not like if you run 100 feet, you've automatically completed a marathon. Next one, completing a marathon is sufficient for running 100 feet because if you've completed a marathon, you've automatically run 100 feet, but it's not necessary. You don't have to complete a marathon in order to run 100 feet. Next one, being a deer is sufficient for being an animal because if you're a deer, you're automatically an animal, but it's not necessary. If being a deer were necessary for being an animal, it would mean that every single animal is a deer. Being an animal is necessary for being a deer, but it's not sufficient. If being an animal were sufficient for being a deer, it would mean that every animal is a deer. This one's a little outdated. It was from last year when masks were required in classrooms. So given, I'll say, last year's ISU policies, wearing a mask was necessary for entering the classroom, but it wasn't sufficient. There were other conditions, like even if you were masked, you couldn't enter the classroom if you were, coughing heavily or something. Earning at least minimum wage is necessary for earning a ton of money, but it's not sufficient, right? If it were, then everybody who earned at least minimum wage would be earning a ton of money. Being a bachelor is sufficient for being unmarried, because if you're a bachelor, you're automatically unmarried, but it's not necessary because you could be a female unmarried person and not be a bachelor. Being a human is necessary for speaking English. You can't speak English if you're not a human, but it's not sufficient because you can be a human without being able to speak English. And correspondingly, speaking English is is sufficient for being a human, but it's not necessary. Okay, that's all of those problems.